I make my watches following the Daniels method. And the Daniels method is basically where one man conceives, designs, and then makes a complete watch from start to finish. This idea that one person is really a watchmaking industry in his own right. From the first moment I met George, this idea just captivated me, and that's all I've ever done since. I wrote to George when I was 19 and asked if he'd apprentice me. And he said he wouldn't. He said he was too busy, he'd never employed anyone before, he always worked better on his own. But he encouraged me and said that if you wanted to make a watch, go away and make it. And I started to make my first watch. I think when I was about 19, I had a small workshop at home. I bought a lathe from a loan that my father gave me, and I started to make my very first pocket watch. The first watch was made, it's shown to George, he told me it was hopeless. So I went away and started to make the second piece, and that took about 5.5 years because I was learning and trying to perfect all the skills that are required to make a handmade watch. Fortunately, at the end of it, it was approved by George, and that ultimately led to me coming over to work here on the Isle of Man with him. The Isle of Man is basically a fairly small island, about 36 miles long by 12 miles wide, in the middle of the Irish Sea. Since arriving, it's captured me really. The scenery is spectacular. It's a great environment to work in and perfect for watchmaking. Today we are making about 10 pieces per year. At the moment, my mainstay is the Series 2 wristwatch and the Daniels anniversary. So the Series 2 wristwatch we started making in 2006, and to date we've made about 70 pieces worldwide. I mean, it's ridiculous really, you know, it's got to be the lowest production watch anywhere in the world. And in 2010 it was, George asked if I would help him to design and make a watch to celebrate 35 years since he invented the coaxial escapement. I worked on that with George. He managed to see the very first piece before he passed away. And since then we've been completing that order, that back order, which is 35 pieces. Last November I launched a new range of watches. So we have a new Series 1, new Series 2, 3 and a 4. And that is going to be the next stage really. So we now have orders for those, and I'll be starting to make the very first few pieces of the new range starting about a year's time. So I now work with a team of watchmakers. There's 8 of us, and I enjoy working with a team. I used to work on my own for many years. Although I enjoyed it, it was a tremendous burden just because of the amount of work that had to be done. Designing and building a watch from start to finish and then trying to make numbers is a hugely daunting task. The thing about this type of work, it's very demanding. I'm expecting a high degree of attention from all my watchmakers, and it's just not for everyone because the watch is it's either right or it's wrong. There's no in between. And so I think that's really the restrictive side of my business. But then again, it suits me. I don't measure my success on volume. I've heard over many years, you know, when I used to go to Basel and so on, you know, people would proudly come up to me and say, oh well, we're now making 50 watches a year or 100 watches or 200 watches a year. And I've never really understood that. You know, to me that's not what success is about. To me, the success is about making great watches, really great watches. When George passed away, he bequeathed the contents of his workshop to me. So that was an incredible honour. And the workshop was emptied, and some of it is now in storage, but some of the key pieces I've retained here at the workshop. When you realise what's been designed at that bench, I mean, it really is incredible. George worked at it for 30-40 years, designed the coaxial escapement, improved the detonate escapement on there, designed his double wheel Daniels escapement. He created some of the most spectacular pieces of work to have ever been created really. You know, wonderful dials. And he always used to say to me, forget the movement. What you need to focus on is the dial and hands. That's the most important thing in a watch. And once you have the balance of the dial and hands correct, the weight of the hands is so important, legibility of the hands, and then the legibility of the dial. Once that's 100%, then you start worrying about the movement. I didn't set out to restore British watchmaking or to try and revitalise it. I just had this overwhelming obsession to try and build what I believe to be a great watch. The great thing about making watches in Britain is there is no industry around us, nobody influencing my design. So what I design is what I make. And I think that's very important. More so on the Isle of Man. Obviously there's no other watchmaking on the Isle of Man. The influences just aren't around, and I can just get on with my day's work and just make what I want to make. And I can design a component, and by the end of the day we can have that component fitted into a watch. And that, to me, is true independence.